I want to talk about something that I think a lot of people experience, but we don't always have language for it. And when we don't have language for something, we usually turn it into self judgment. We make it personal. We make it a flaw. We make it a failure. We make it into proof that something is really kind of wrong with us. And what I want to talk about is this: why calm can feel boring after trauma, why peace can feel flat, why quiet can feel wrong, why when your life finally gets a little bit stable, part of you starts reaching for something to spike the energy again. Argument, a crisis, a late night spiral, a doom scroll session, a risky decision, a text you shouldn't send, a story you shouldn't tell yourself. And the reason I want to talk about it is because people really do get to a place where they think, okay, I have everything I said I wanted. I have stability. I have a roof. I have a little breathing room. I have people who care about me. I'm not in the middle of a disaster. So why do I feel restless? Why do I feel empty? Why do I feel like something is missing? Why does calm feel like I'm understimulated or underwater or just bored? And if you've ever felt that, what you want to hear this right at the beginning, it doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you're ungrateful. It doesn't mean you secretly want drama. It doesn't mean you're doing healing wrong. It usually means your nervous system has been trained on chaos and calm is a new language. So let's unpack it, right? When you go through long seasons of unpredictability, whether that was your childhood, a difficult relationship, poverty, addiction in the family, an unsafe home, emotional volatility, chronic illness, or simply years of being in survival mode, your body adapts. And I mean your actual body, not just your thoughts. Your nervous system adapts. Your system learns, I need to be alert. It learns, I need to scan. It learns, I need to anticipate. It learns, if I relax, something bad happens. It learns, if things are quiet, that's not peace, that's the calm before the storm, before the other shoe drops. So you become good at living in the heightened states. You become good at being on. You become good at managing intensity. You become good at quick decisions and emotional weather changes and reading the room. You become good at bracing. And here's the thing nobody tells you: when your body gets used to that chemistry, when adrenaline and cortisol and all of that becomes your baseline, calm doesn't feel like relief. Calm can feel like withdrawal, really. And that's the closest word I can really find for it, as I think withdrawal, because your body was really used to a certain level of intensity. And when the intensity drops, it doesn't automatically interpret that as safety. It can interpret it as danger or emptiness or something's missing or I should be doing something or I'm about to be blindsided. So calm feels boring. Calm feels flat. Calm feels like you're not alive enough. Calm feels like something is wrong, even if nothing is wrong. And that right there is the moment where a lot of people really sabotage themselves, not because they're bad at people, not because they're immature, not because they like chaos, but because their system is trying to return what it knows. Their system is trying to find familiarity, and familiarity feels safe even when it's not. Let me say that again because it's huge. Familiarity feels safe even when it's not. So if your body grew up in chaos, chaos can feel like home, even when you hate it, even when you're exhausted by it, even when you consciously want peace. And that can be so confusing because your mind is saying, I want stability, and your body is saying, this is too quiet. So, what do people do? They reach for stimulation. They reach for something to spike the energy. They reach for conflict. They reach for urgency. They reach for the dopamine hit of the phone. They reach for the adrenaline hit of the news. They reach for the emotional roller coaster of a complicated relationship. They reach for the late night spiral because at least it feels familiar. And sometimes they don't even realize they're doing it. They think they're just staying informed or being realistic or having high standards or thinking things through, but really their nervous system is trying to recreate intensity because intensity is what it knows how to live inside. So the first thing I want to offer you is this: if calm feels boring, it may be because calm is not your baseline yet. Calm is still unfamiliar. Calm is still new. And if it's new, it's going to feel weird. Here's an analogy that I like. If you've ever been in a loud environment for a long time, like a factory or a busy street, or even just a house with constant noise, when you step into a quiet room, the quiet can feel almost uncomfortable at first. Your ears are still ringing, your body is still expecting noise. The silence can feel too loud. That's what calm can feel like after trauma. The quiet is too loud. And again, we don't talk about this enough because the cultural story is that healing feels good. Healing looks peaceful. Healing looks like a spa commercial. Healing looks like candles and journaling and soft music and deep breaths. But actual healing in the body often feels like learning how to tolerate peace. And that's not glamorous because peace requires you to be with yourself. Peace requires you to feel sensations you've been outrunning. Peace requires you to sit in a room without a crisis to solve. Peace requires you to notice what's underneath the chaos. And what's underneath the chaos is often grief. It's often sadness. It's often anger that never had anywhere safe to go. It's often fear. It's often the younger part of you that learned, I can't let my guard down. So when the guard finally starts to lower, all of that can begin to surface. And then calm doesn't feel boring in a simple way. Calm feels boring in the sense that it's not distracting you anymore. It's not sedating you anymore. It's not keeping you busy. Calm makes you face your inner life. And that can be scary. So, what I want to do here is separate two things because I think they get conflated. There's a difference between calm and numb. And a lot of people have experienced numbness and called it calm. And those are not the same. Numbness is when you shut down. Numbness is when you disconnect. Numbness is when you go blank. Numbness is when you're not feeling much of anything because feeling was too costly. Calm is different. Calm is when you're present. Calm is when you're here. Calm is when you're in your body and you're not an alarm. Calm has aliveness. Calm has softness. Calm has space. But if you've been numb before, you confuse calm with numbness. You might think, this quiet feeling is dangerous because your history with quiet was shut down, not safety. So part of the work is teaching your system what calm actually is. And that's where the practice comes in because your nervous system is like a creature. It learns through repetition, it learns through experience, it learns through safety cues. It doesn't learn through logic alone. You can tell yourself, I'm safe now, and your body could still be braced. You can tell yourself, relax, and your body can still be scanning. You can tell yourself, stop overthinking, and your system can still be trying to prevent future pain. So we have to work with the body's language, not just the mind's language. And the body's language is sensation, repetition, and evidence. So, how do we do this practically? Well, how do we stop needing chaos to feel alive? I'm going to give you a few ways to think about this. I'm going to keep it very human and grounded. No perfection, no spiritual performance, just real. One of the first practices is simply noticing your relationship with stimulation because stimulation has become our drug of choice as a culture. Even people who aren't addicts are addicted to stimulation. We're all walking around with little slot machines in our pockets, talking on them right now. And the thing about constant stimulation is it trains you to feel bored when you're not stimulated. It trains you to feel restless when you're not getting input. It trains you to feel like you're missing something when nothing is happening. So if calm feels boring, one of the most basic questions you can ask is, what level of stimulation has my system been living at? Because if you're consuming adrenaline content all day, outrage, fear, catastrophe, political doom, relationship trauma, gossip, conflict, you're literally bathing your nervous system in intensity. You're training it, you're teaching it. So, of course, calm feels flat by comparison. This is why I say, and I mean it, if your content is built on adrenaline, your life becomes built on adrenaline. Not because you're weak, because your body adapts to what you feed it. So you don't have to shame yourself. You just have to get curious. You have to start noticing what inputs spike you and what inputs settle you. And sometimes the biggest spiritual act is not a new meditation technique. It's just turning down the volume of your inputs, not to avoid reality, but to stop living in constant chemical warfare. Another practice is learning to recognize the moment when your system reaches for chaos, because there's usually a fork in the road. It might be that moment where you want to check your phone again, even though you just checked it. It might be that moment when you want to send the text that you know is going to create drama. It might be that moment where you want to bring up the old argument. It might be that moment where you want to scroll the news right before bed. It might be that moment where you want to pick apart your life and catastrophize, because at least catastrophizing gives your mind a job. That moment is where power lives, not because you always have to make the perfect choice, but because that moment is where you can pause and say, okay, what am I actually needing right now? Am I needing stimulation, or am I needing grounding? Am I needing reassurance, or am I needing rest? Am I trying to avoid something, or am I trying to connect with myself? And when you ask those questions, something interesting happens. You stop being the victim of your impulses. You become the witness. You become the one who can choose. And that's not about control, it's about discernment. Now, I want to say something about boredom itself, because boredom gets a bad reputation. People think boredom is just a problem, like, I'm bored, so I need something. But boredom is sometimes a doorway. Boredom is sometimes the space where your deeper self begins to speak again. Because when you remove all the stimulation, you start hearing the quieter things. You start noticing desires that aren't urgent, but they're real. You start noticing grief that you've been outrunning. You start noticing that there's a part of you that wants beauty or creativity or connection or solitude or movement or prayer or play or quiet. And you've been living in survival mode. Those desires can feel irrelevant. They can feel silly. They can feel like luxuries, but they're not luxuries. They're signs of life. So when calm feels boring, sometimes happening is that your system is finally quiet enough for your real life to try to come back online. And that can feel unfamiliar, because you might have been living in coping mode for so long that you forgot what you actually like. You forgot what you actually want, and you forgot what gives you energy that isn't adrenaline. So, part of the practice is rebuilding a relationship with what I would call clean energy. Clean energy is different from adrenaline. Adrenaline is frantic, it's spiky, it's urgent, it's addictive. Clean energy is steady, it's nourishing, it's spacious. It doesn't leave you ashamed afterward. And clean energy can come from simple things: walking, stretching, making something with your hands, listening to music that settles your system, cooking, writing, being with someone safe, being in nature, prayer, breathing, even just taking a shower slowly, like you actually live in your body. Those things can sound too simple, and that's exactly why they matter, because trauma often makes us feel like we need something dramatic to feel alive. But a healed nervous system finds life in the ordinary. That's one of the markers. That's one of the signs you're coming home. Now, I also want to talk about identity here, because identity can get wrapped up in chaos. Some people don't just live in chaos, they become the person who lives in chaos. It becomes part of the story, becomes part of the self concept. I'm the one who handles crises, you might say. I'm the one who's always dealing with something. I'm the one who can't catch a break. I'm the one who has to be strong. That was me so much. And if that's been your identity, calm can feel like losing yourself, because who are you if you're not the person managing chaos? That's a real question. And it can be frightening, honestly, because calm doesn't just remove drama. Calm removes roles. Calm removes the identity of the survivor. And I'm not saying you stop being strong. I'm saying you stop needing pain to prove your strength. So sometimes calm feels boring because it threatens the version of you that you've had to be. And if that version of you kept you alive, you're going to have a compassion for it. You're going to say, thank you. You did your job, but you're also going to say, we're building something new now. And that's a grief process. It's not just a decision, which brings me to something else. There's often a grief underneath our addiction to chaos because chaos is distracting. Chaos keeps you busy. Chaos keeps you from feeling the losses you've never fully grieved. So when calm arrives, grief can arrive with it. And then people think calm is the problem, but calm isn't the problem. Calm is the space where what has been waiting can finally be felt. That doesn't mean you have to dive into grief and drown in it. It just means you honor it. You recognize it. You let it have a voice. A lot of us, when we were younger, didn't have a safe place for feelings. We had to keep going. We had to survive. We had to be functional. We had to be the adult. We had to be the one who didn't make waves. We had to keep the peace, even if we didn't have peace inside. So feelings got postponed. And then later, when life becomes stable, those feelings come looking for you. So again, calm can feel boring because calm is the first time your system has the capacity to feel what it couldn't feel before. And that's not a problem. That's really progress. Now let's talk about stimulation addiction because that phrase can sound harsh. It can sound like you're accusing people of being addicts. That's not really what I mean. What I mean is that the nervous system adapts to certain states. If you've been living in high intensity states for years, those states become your normal. Your threshold for stimulation changes. Your system needs more to feel really engaged. So small, quiet pleasures don't register. You don't feel them. Your system doesn't detect them because they're too subtle. That's why people say things like, I don't know what I like anymore, or nothing excites me, or everything feels blah, or I have no motivation. And that can be depression. Yes. It can also be overstimulation. It can be that your system has been hit with so much intensity that it can't feel the quieter notes anymore. So part of the work is lowering the threshold. Part of the work is recalibrating, like when your eyes adjust from bright sunlight into a dim room. At first, you can't see anything, and then slowly you begin to see shapes and then details and then color. Calm is like that. Calm is a dim room to a nervous system that's been staring into bright, frantic lights. So you give it time. You don't shame it. You don't brush it. You don't make it into a moral test, as one likes to do. I know I do. You treat it like a system learning a new baseline. So, what does that look like as a practice? I'll give you a few gentle, concrete things that you can experiment with, not as rules, just as really experiments. One is something that I call micro calm. People think they need to go from chaos to meditation retreats. That's not usually realistic. It's also not always safe for the system. If you've been in chaos, big silence can feel terrifying. So instead of forcing yourself into hour-long calm, you practice 2 minutes. 2 minutes where you don't fix anything. 2 minutes where you don't scroll. 2 minutes where you just feel your feet on the ground. 2 minutes where you breathe and let the world be loud without taking it into your body. And then you do it again later. Microcalm is like teaching a scared animal that you're not dangerous. You don't rush it. You show consistency, you show gentleness, you show evidence. Another experiment is what I call clean boredom. This is where you intentionally allow yourself to be bored without immediately solving it. You sit there, you stare out the window, you fold laundry without music, you walk without a podcast, you drive without needing to fill every single space. And at first it will feel awful. It will feel like, why am I doing this? But over time, something happens. Your system starts to settle, your thoughts slow down, your body stops scanning, and you begin to hear yourself again. Not the anxious self, the deeper self. Another experiment is learning the difference between urgency and importance. A lot of people confuse these. The phone is urgent, the headlines are urgent, the drama is urgent. But your life is important. Your sleep is important. Your relationships are important. Your breath is important. Your health is important. Your peace is important. So When you feel pulled into urgency, ask, is this urgent or is it important? And if it's urgent but not important, you let it pass, not because you don't care, but because you're building a life that isn't run by panic. And then maybe the most important practice of all is simply learning to name what calm feels like in your body. Because if you don't name it, you won't recognize it. Calm might feel like a softer jaw. Calm might feel like your shoulders dropping without you forcing them. Calm might feel like a longer exhale. Calm might feel like you're not bracing for the next thing. Calm might feel like you can taste your food. Calm might feel like you're present in the room. These are small things, but they're the markers, they're the breadcrumbs, they're the evidence that your system is learning. And as you begin to recognize calm, you begin to trust it. And as you begin to trust it, it stops feeling boring. Now, not because calm becomes exciting, but because calm becomes alive. There's a kind of aliveness in calm that you can't feel when you're addicted to adrenaline. It's subtle, it's warm, it's like being held by life instead of fighting life. But you have to let your system adjust to it. So if calm feels boring for you right now, I want you to consider this. Maybe boredom is the doorway. Maybe boredom is the sign that your system is no longer being fed by crisis. Maybe boredom is a space where your real self begins to reemerge. And that is not a problem. It's actually a gift. I'll end with something that might seem or sound simple, but I think it matters. If you grew up in chaos, you may have learned to measure love by intensity. You may have learned to measure safety by control. You may have learned to measure life by struggle. So when life becomes simple, it can feel unreal. It can feel undeserved. It can feel like it won't last. And in that fear, people will sometimes sabotage the simple life because at least sabotage is familiar. But your work now, your practice is to stay, to remain, to let good things be good, to let calm be calm, to let peace be boring for a while until your system learns it's safe. You don't have to force joy. You don't have to chase joy. You don't have to pretend. You just practice safety. You practice presence. You practice micro calm. You practice clean boredom. You practice noticing the subtle signs that you're okay right now. And little by little, boring becomes peaceful. Peaceful becomes nourishing. Nourishing becomes a life that actually feels like yours. So if you're in that season where quiet feels wrong, where calm feels flat, where you're tempted to stir up chaos just to feel something, be gentle with yourself. That impulse isn't proof that you're failing. It's proof that your system is learning, and learning takes time. So until later, love, peace, and release.